Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, I'd like to make a response to the motion at hand. Honourable Speaker, let me begin by acknowledging a sobering reality. There's never been a time when Fijian women and girls have been spared the brutality of domestic and sexual violence. It may be painful to accept, but that is a tragic and indisputable fact of our history, and indeed the history of all humanity. And that scourge of violence and abuse perpetuates to this very day. Anyone who rejects the truth stands in denial of the very suffering of women across generations and the survivors of abuse today. Only by acknowledging the age-old nature of these crimes do we stand a chance at eradicating them entirely. Only by treating domestic violence as the national problem that is, can we address it properly at all levels of society and in every Fijian community. And only by taking this problem head-on and pursuing real solutions that embody the truth can we give women and girls in Fiji the opportunity to live free from the lurking threat of violence and abuse. Honourable Speaker, I've met with Fijians who have spent nearly their entire lives helping lead the campaign to end domestic and sexual violence in Fiji. I've given those leaders my total commitment to ending this long-standing plague on Fijian society. I've raised awareness in communities on the resources available to women who have survived abuse. I've demanded that the men of Fiji join me in taking ownership of this issue, because like it or not, it is men who perpetrate the vast majority of these crimes, regardless of their ethnicity, as some still say, and regardless of their social status, the province they come from, or whether they worship in church, at temple, or in a mosque. Abuse knows no color, no creed. And the abuse of Fijian women will not end until all men make the effort to condemn this sort of violence, condemn abusers, and speak out in defense of the women and girls of this country. The nature of these crimes can make them incredibly difficult to combat. Physical and mental abuse often go hand in hand, and victims can be manipulated into thinking that they are to blame for the crimes committed against them. Victims can be intimidated into silence. Crimes go unreported, and abusers go unpunished. What's worse is that entire communities turn a blind eye to the abusers and do not report such crimes to the police. They accept and expect a certain level of abuse against women and against girls. The culture of tolerance is the ugly underbelly of Fijian society that stretches back as far as history records, and that has made accounting for the true scale of this issue all the more difficult. Mr. Speaker, the patriarchal mindset of men who commit abuse doesn't always manifest in violence. We see that same mentality in men who think women ought to be brewing tea in the boardroom rather than leading the meeting. The men who think women belong in the kitchen making dinner rather than going to work and earning a paycheck to support their families. And the men who believe they rank above women, even in this very parliament, simply by virtue of being male. Those men all share the same backwards mentality. Those men all feed into the same culture of abuse in a society. And in my view, those men are all cowards. Mr. Speaker, Honorable Moses Imbulitabo proved himself to be such a man. when in response to an horrific act of violence committed against a Fijian woman, he gave voice to an ugly and insufferable lie on his social media. I rise today to condemn that statement. I hesitate to even read Bulitabo's words aloud. The language is offensive and unbecoming of his august parliament. But it is important we state exactly what was said so that we can ensure that it is never, ever repeated. On 4th July 2019, Bulitabo posted a message on his Facebook that contained the following: "Murder and stabbing in the past were only done by Fijians, who are descendants of the indentured laborers from British India, and was never part of Fijians who are Itaukais, now slowly shedding some Itobo Bulangi, meaning foreign behavior." Mr. Speaker, those were the first words out of Bulitabo's mouth upon hearing news of a murder of an innocent woman. His first instinct was to blame an entire race of people for the evil actions of a sick and twisted individual. But it didn't end there. He went on to stereotype Indo-Fijian women as being promiscuous. He claimed that Itaukai men only beat Itaukai women because they are bigger than them. Worse, he insinuated that Itaukai women should be thankful these beatings are carried out with weapons. Every word, Honorable Speaker, was a slap in the face to the victims of domestic abuse and a step backwards for our campaign to rid our country of these terrible crimes. But I think what Bulitabo didn't say is just as despicable as what he did say. He didn't condemn the individual actions of that abuser and killer. He didn't call for an end to domestic violence in all its forms against women of all backgrounds. He didn't raise awareness of the resources available to women who are suffering from domestic violence. He didn't mention number 1560, the helpline available to all women 24/7, where they can report domestic violence and seek assistance. He didn't choose to lead. He didn't choose to be decent. He didn't choose to be actually try helping women indeed. Instead, he chose to give voice to a divisive lie. Make no mistake, there were no good intentions behind this post, Honorable Speaker. It came from a place of hate. Bulitabo took a ghastly crime and used it as an ammunition in his campaign to drive his divisive us versus them narrative, the same narrative he's pushed in his entire political career. Mr. Speaker, today it has fallen upon all of us to do the job that the leader of SODELPA and his new president should have done long ago. Not only by condemning Bulitabo, but by speaking the truth and undoing the damages done to the national effort to rid Fiji of gender-based violent crimes. Mr. Speaker, the tragic reality is that murder in all communities all over the world is as ancient as Cain and Abel, and women have historically been disproportionate victims of such deadly abuse. We can't view our past through rose-colored lenses. The notion that Itaukai society was a utopia free from gender-based violence or that weapons weren't used to deadly effect is nonsense. The historical record is clear. Itaukai people waged war. They committed murder and they perpetrated acts of deadly violence against women, as did the ancestors of Indo-Fijians, as did the ancestors of the British, the Chinese, the ancestors of the Nigerians, and every other people on earth. And sadly, Mr. Speaker, descendants of all those communities still commit such crimes, and women far too often remain the victims. Since the dawn of humanity, the root cause of these atrocities has been a struggle for power and economic dominance coupled with a misogynic mentality that sees women as inherently unequal and as possessions that can be used and abused as well. When we make up ridiculous justifications for domestic violence in our society, Honorable Speaker, we give those men an excuse for these actions. It is people like Mbulitabo who give those abusers the chance to blame their despicable behavior on someone else. Frankly, I find the idea that it took a man responsible for their own actions to be insulting. The truth is, no one forces any man to be an abuser. No one forces any man to murder innocent women. Evil men decide to commit those cowardly acts all on their own. What we should be demanding is that those men take responsibility for the crimes they've chosen to commit, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of the religion, regardless of their province or status in society. Mr. Speaker, I realize Mbulitabo has since tried to superficially distance himself from his statement, but anyone who has read his so-called apology will know that he was not genuinely seeking forgiveness. No sooner had the words, "I apologize," left his lips than he doubled down on his totally unfounded argument. That's not a real apology, Honorable Speaker. That's not a real effort at seeking reconciliation. And anyone who pretends otherwise is deluding themselves intentionally or otherwise. Mr. Speaker, were any member of the Fiji Party, Fiji First Party, were any member of the Fiji First Party to ever make such statements, that day would mark the last day in this party. That's the standard by which this government operates. That's the high level of responsibility to which we all adhere. And it is shameful that the leader of the opposition and the president of SODELPA have allowed Mbulitabo to remain among the party's ranks. It's shameful that he still sits in this parliament. And it's shameful that the leader of the opposition and so many on that side of the house have refused to stand up against Mbulitabo. They have refused to stand up for the truth, and they have refused to stand up for the women and girls of Fiji. Mbulitabo has been verbally abusing the women of his own party for years. He's a bully inside this house and outside as well. So I have to ask, how much power does Mbulitabo wield in his party, in that party, that he can intimidate so many of his party members into silence? To the men who rank in the opposition, many of you have daughters, many of you have wives, and all of you have mothers. Why have you not spoken in their defense? To the women of SODELPA and NFP, who have failed to categorically condemn Mbulitabo in the 35 days since he made those comments, where have you been? Honorable Tambuya, Honorable Randono, Honorable Ngyoni Barabi, Honorable Kiapa, and Honorable Ngerengere Tambua. Your silence has signified your compliance and your acceptance of a despicable attempt to excuse domestic violence in Fijian society by directing misplaced blame along ethnic lines. In the aftermath of Mbulitabo's assault on the truth and common decency, your nation demanded your voice and your condemnation of this hateful ignorance. But you chose to stay quiet. I urge you, do not let that silence continue. And don't fill that void with ambiguous and unspecific criticism on meaningless rhetoric. You must name Mbulitabo, and you must emphatically condemn his words of hatred. You have a right to speak. You have a freedom of expression. And now you have the opportunity to rise above politics and speak to what you believe to be right and just. I ask that you do so, not for the sake of your political careers, but at the sake of every Fijian, particularly the women and girls and young girls who have been victims of domestic abuse. Those survivors deserve to have this issue treated seriously. They deserve leaders who speak out in their defense. They deserve to know that the crimes committed against them are categorically condemned by those elected to represent their interests. This is your final opportunity to do something, to say something, and to send a clear message to our people that we don't tolerate this kind of behavior. Not now, not ever. Mr. Speaker, Ambulitawo's statement was not only steeped in misogyny, it was racist. And it is no coincidence that his post came on the heels of comments by Honorable Pratunengama, who called NFP and FLP parties Wulangi parties in Fiji. Mr. Speaker, I know the word Wulangi itself is not inherently offensive. I know it is a word often associated with a hallowed guest. In some cases, it can be used respectively. You can be a Wulangi in a village that is not your own. You can be a Wulangi to another province. I myself, Honorable Speaker, have been a Wulangi in villages in Fiji before. But what some fail to understand, including Honorable Kepa, Paul Ngerati, and other apologists, is that the context in which the word is used is what matters. Absolutely. At the national level, the notion of being a Wulangi does not apply to any Fijian. No Fijian can be a Wulangi in this country to which they are born, where their ancestors are buried, and where their grandchildren and great-grandchildren will one day call home. And our Indo-Fijian brothers and sisters are not and never will be Wulangis in Fiji. They are one with us and they are part of us now and always. The NFP and FLP are both Fijian parties. They are not foreign. They are members not staying in Fiji on a tourist visa. They are Fijian as I am, and as Fijian as anyone sitting in this parliament. For those who fail to see the harm in referring to our countrymen and women as Wulangi, Ambulitawo's racist tirade proves exactly why it is a problem. Because when we see our people as outsiders or as foreign to our nation, we narrow our view of the world through the clouded lens of ethnicity, of religion, and background. We don't see national problems for what they are. Instead, we blame everything, even individual choices and actions, on some ambiguous other people. So, Honorable Speaker, this isn't a question of semantics, as some like to paint it. It is a question of something far bigger and more important. It is a question of who we are as a nation and the level of compassion which we treat our fellow citizens. It is a question of the bonds that bind us together, the purpose we share, and our collective commitments to this country. Every minute we spend viewing national issues as ethnic issues, as religious issues, or as issues relating to different provinces is a minute wasted. And when it comes to preventing domestic violence, every minute counts. Solving a Fijian problem, such as violence against women, requires action from all Fijians. It requires we put down our communal and political banners and rally together to protect those who are suffering, those who have survived abuse and those living in fear, this very moment of reporting their abuses to authorities. Honorable Speaker, God has blessed Fiji with world-renowned beauty, and He has filled our country with people who wield a range of extraordinary talents and capable minds, and who hold a tremendous capacity for love and acceptance. But God's greatest gift, Honorable Speaker, is something less tangible. His greatest gift is the opportunity He's given each of us to be good stewards of those many blessings. That includes the beauty and the bounty of our natural world, and it includes the people, all of the people who call this nation their home. We can only call ourselves good stewards when all of God's people are cared for, protected, and empowered to better their lives. That includes those who are strong and those who are weak, those who may be different from ourselves and those who are our kin, and those who are most vulnerable, from the young to the old and all those in between. It is our duty as elected leaders in this parliament to lead our people in this sacred aim. When we speak, others listen. When we act, others follow. And no matter which side of this chamber you sit, our voices and our deeds today will become the words and actions of future generations. Let's not raise a generation of men like Moses Mbulitabu and Fijians who enable his behavior. We can set a new example, a better example. We can support this motion and we can be leaders worthy of these people, worthy of the people we're meant to serve. In this moment, Honorable Speaker, the eyes and the expectations of our fellow Fijians are upon every one of us. The women of this country are watching. The young girls of this country are watching. And survivors of domestic and sexual violence are watching as well. They are waiting for us to make stand in their defense of the truth and in defense of all those most vulnerable in society. I urge every member of this House to back this motion. If you fail to condemn this statement, history will not forget your silence, nor will the Fijian people. Thank you, Excellent Honorable Speaker.
I thank the Honourable Prime Minister for his statement.